Minister John Penrose.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I pick up where the honourable lady, my opposite number for the Labour Party, left off by saying I am very pleased to hear, I think from everybody, that there is limited opposition to this bill, that there are people who are willing to support it on a cross-party basis, and I think that is incredibly welcome and a perhaps unusual example of cross-party unanimity and consensus in what has been a fairly stroppy set of debates over the course of the last couple of weeks on a variety of different subjects. So it is lovely to be here on a day when there is agreement breaking out across different parts of the House. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, I wouldn't want to overstate that degree of cross-party consensus and agreement, because the other thing which was widely shared is a sense of frustration. Frustration at the lack of a Stormont executive. We have heard that from pretty much every single speaker during the course of the afternoon. Frustration, therefore, inevitably, because it matches that lack of a Stormont executive, at the limits of this bill. This bill, as we've heard repeatedly, is there to keep the wheels turning in Northern Ireland, but not to undertake some much-needed reforms, because those much-needed reforms require a Stormont executive to function. And we have heard repeatedly, Madam Deputy Speaker, a long litany of examples of things which are either not being done which need to be done, or things which are not being done as efficiently as they could be done, just simply because there is not the political air cover in Stormont in order to take much-needed decisions to change what is happening. And inevitably, as you go along, this is a comment which is many people, including I think the chairman of the Northern Ireland Affairs Committee, but others as well, have made. This is no comment or criticism of the civil servants in the Northern Ireland Civil Service, or indeed in the Northern Ireland Office either. They are honour bound to take decisions based on the last set of policy decisions which are available to them. Some of them now 2-3 years old, and they have to try and draw a line between those policy decisions and remain true to those policy decisions now 2-3 years later. I give way to the honourable gentleman.
Again, what I said earlier. In agreeing with what the Minister is saying, and it's not meant to be critical, I accept that with the lack of a devolved administration in Northern Ireland, of course, the civil servants, we can't scrutinise the decisions here. But can I ask the Minister again to reflect on the fact there are changes being made within this budget on the basis of advice from civil servants? And whilst we may not want to scrutinise or criticise those decisions, there is a complete lack of information available to the House of Commons about why those changes should be made. So will he take on board what the Secretary of State has said and look again at what information is provided to this House so that we can base our decisions on more information than we've got at the present time?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I do take that on board, and I take it on board particularly since I think the honourable gentleman is one of the last ministers who had to take direct rule. He was not. I'm giving him responsibilities which he never had to hold. I would also mention to him that there is in fact a command paper currently available in the library of this House which deals with the very detailed breakdown. It's well over an inch thick of how money has been spent in Northern Ireland during the year that is just finishing. So there is a huge amount of detail, but it is backward-looking. And while that is helpful, and I'm sure welcome to everybody here to ensure some degree of accountability, I think we have all been agreed, including the Secretary of State, but all of us as well, right the way across the House, that on a prospective basis, we all hanker after a better process than this. But the problem is fundamentally and centrally the lack of a functioning executive in Stormont. I was delighted that the Shadow Secretary of State was clear in saying that he didn't think that direct rule is justified at this stage. He's also right, and I think he made the point, that because of that, because of the shortcomings which we have all been enunciating, there is, I think the phrase he used was a tariff for political failure at Stormont. And I think the chairman of the Northern Ireland Affairs Committee talked of quoted in fact, the slow decay and stagnation which is happening in Northern Ireland politics as a result. The chairman of the Northern Ireland Affairs Committee also, I think rightly, perhaps levelled the balance a little in terms of the restoration talks efforts made by my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State and the Prime Minister, but also, and again I think rightly, was positive and fulsome in his praise of both the Northern Ireland Civil Service and the NIO and their unstinting efforts to do a professional job in an extremely difficult and increasingly challenging political environment. I'll happily give way to my right honourable friend.
Madam Deputy Speaker, can I just, in all fairness, now challenge the Minister of State in the way that he congratulated the Shadow Minister on direct rule? If direct rule today isn't the answer, when? And the answer, if it's not soon, why?
Madam Deputy Speaker, a number of people have said during the course of today that they would regard it as a last resort. And I think I would agree with that as well, because we had to be incredibly careful about what we wish for here. We had to be extremely cautious about the notion of starting to take the drug of direct rule, because it very swiftly leads to a very difficult and very precarious political decision. A political position. And so I would say to my right honourable friend that there is a process laid out at the moment in primary legislation passed by this House in the EFEF Act that says we have firstly 5 months and then potentially renewable another further 5 months in which to find a consensus and get an executive re-established at Stormont, and at that point to give him his answer on his process point about if not now then when. Then at that point there are statutory obligations on my right honourable friend the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland which will require decisions to be made at those various different waypoints. But I think it is extremely dangerous and extremely difficult for us all to prejudge or indeed to wish that those talks, stuttering though they are, but attempted though they definitely are, should not be given enough time to come to a sensible conclusion, because I think everybody has been clear that that is what we want them to do. We want them to be successful if they possibly can. The SNP spokesman was of the same mind. He spoke about a paralysing political stalemate in Stormont which must not become the new normal, and I agree. I'll happily give way to the
lady. I'm very grateful to the Minister. I'm sure I'm not the only one who blinked and drew breath when I think I heard the Minister use the words the drug of direct rule. Perhaps I misheard him, but I will give the Minister the opportunity just to pick a more appropriate noun to describe direct rule.
A legal drug.
Madam Deputy Speaker, it was certainly not my intention to cause the Honourable Lady to draw breath. The point I was trying to make is that direct rule is something which is potentially extremely dangerous and can lead to a very difficult political situation if we are not all collectively very careful. It is not a step to be taken lightly or simply or frivolously at all. I'll happily.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm grateful to the Minister. It's probably worth me, in agreeing with him, point out that the last period of direct rule lasted for 5 years. This was a total antithesis of the ambitions of the devolved administration.
Deputy Speaker, I agree strongly with that, and I think that there is a pretty much unanimous agreement right the way across the House during the course of this debate about that point. Very swiftly, yes.
I think what the House understood by the Minister's first remark and his reformulation is that short-term temptations can lead into situations which are adverse and undesirable.
Minister.
Indeed so, Madam Deputy Speaker. If I can move on to the comments made by the honourable gentleman from Strangford. He had a long list of local projects which are not happening, which he thinks could and should happen were there to be proper government led in Stormont. And also, so did the honourable gentleman from East Antrim as well. He had a list of all sorts of missed opportunities. Everything from mining to tourism was mentioned. Both of them had some interesting suggestions which I will take away rather than reacting to now about how we might perhaps exert more pressure through potentially changing rules in Stormont. And I will treat those with the care that they were offered, I'm sure. And the gentleman from East Londonderry was passionate, I think, about saying that Northern Ireland is on the cusp of a breakthrough. The economic performance and indeed the social cohesion in Northern Ireland is out of sight better than it was 10, 20 years ago. but that it is being frustrated and that further progress could be made, but that we are caught. I think his phrase was, the governance of Northern Ireland is neither fish nor fowl. It is neither London nor local. And should this be solved, then that would make a huge difference. And then my opposite number on the Labour benches from Bristol South spent some time talking about important issues to do with public services, health transformation budgets, for example, and how that money can be used to make some of the changes, because they were already agreed in policy before the Stormont executive changed. But she was also right, again, as others have done, to point out that the amount of transformation that can be done is limited by the political constraints under which everybody here has been describing. I will happily give way, and then I must make progress.
Just on that issue of health transformation, because the Permanent Secretary of the Department for Health has been clear that £100 million went into health transformation funding last year. Another £100 million will go in this year as a direct result of confidence in supply money. And he has welcomed that greatly, because this is an opportunity to roll out things like multidisciplinary teams and other things that can actually save money going forward. So these are not insignificant. I mean, these are very, very substantial amounts of money that are going to transform the health service as a result of the confidence and supply deal.
The honourable gentleman is absolutely right. There is a very significant transformation going on. There's a very significant amount of transformation funds going in to let that transformation happen. But I think it is also true to say that more transformation would be possible if there was political leadership as well. They are limited not so much by the money at the moment, but by the ability to take policy decisions, fresh policy decisions, which would allow further progress to be made. And that, Madam Deputy Speaker, is the frustration under which we are all labouring for the course of this second reading debate. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, on that basis, I plan to let us move on to consider the remaining stages of this bill. I am delighted that there is a cross-party consensus that this should proceed, but I think that ultimately, very, very swiftly, I will take an intervention, and then I will.
I'm grateful. In my remarks, I also specifically asked, given the progress that the government made on the Lord Chief Justice's proposals, whether he would give us an answer on progress towards the medical school as part of the Ulster University, which is so critical and time critical, but is also critical to the future of provision of training places for doctors, particularly in Northern Ireland, will help go towards reducing that locum bill. If you could give some comment back on that, we'd be very grateful.
Very, very swiftly, Madam Deputy Speaker, because I don't want to hold up the rest of the process. But the Honourable Lady is quite right. She did ask the specific question. Let me make two comments, if I can, in response. The first one is that the judicial changes are not actually a London government or a Westminster government decision. They are taken, I think, rightly by independent judiciary in Northern Ireland. But the point that she is making about the medical school, that is something which I think needs to be addressed as part of the City deal discussions, which are currently getting underway, and I'm very happy to discuss that with both local people and, if necessary, with her as well. And with that, Madam Deputy Speaker, I propose to do something unusual for a politician: stop talking and sit down.
Thank you. The question is that the bill be now read a second time. As many as that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it.